Welcome to The Thriving Marriage, the podcast for those who want to get their spouse back in love with them and truly thrive.
You'll learn why 95% of people don't save their marriage and the secret method no one else is talking about that will change everything for you. Are you ready? Let's turn tragedy to triumph.
Here are your hosts, international marriage experts, Marc Johnston and Heather Choate.
Hi everyone, welcome to the Thriving Marriage Podcast. My name is Marc Johnston. Heather will not be joining me today. We've been kind of going back and forth a bit over the last month or so, just with vacations and other big life events going on. But we want to make sure that we're always providing some quality information and content for all of you listening out there. So, I know the announcement was talking about big mistakes that you don't want to make in repairing your marriage. I wanted to speak about something a little bit different. We might get back to that topic, and I apologize for any of the confusion there. So today I actually wanted to talk about this term, speaking your truth. You know, I see it out there, and generally what people mean with this is speaking your truth means that you stay true to who you are, and you make that very vocal. Whether it's your feelings, your opinions, or your morals. It's an idea that you should not hide what you feel for the sake of someone's approval of you. And I really like this idea, except at the same time, I often have seen it used inappropriately, you know, as a way to just put out a lot of hurt towards other people, or a lot of hurt from yourself. So we're going to get all into that, but before we do, we are going to get into our client win of the week. This one is coming from Monica, and Monica shares with us. She says that she just had a big win. She said he wants to work on our relationship and marriage. We both agree we have a long road ahead of us to repair and grow from what brought us to the brink of divorce. I'm hopeful for our future and grateful for the guidance and mindset help I've gotten through this course so far. This is the first time since last January that my husband has made any declaration that he's willing to try. So I always love seeing these sort of turnarounds. I'm especially happy that Monica is getting a lot out of our course. I mean, that's primarily why I'm here, is because I love seeing that we as an organization are having an impact, or that some of my work is having an impact on some people's lives. So I'm really happy for Monica. These sort of things, I mean, it happens all the time where it might be, a year or close to a year or more, and things then start to turn around. People start to cool off a little bit. They start letting go of some of their anger, and a lot of it has to do with making some big changes. And we really believe here that that there is possibilities to put a relationship back together, if only one person is willing to try. So exactly what happened here with Monica, and congratulations. So as I was saying, we're talking about speaking your truth. Now, some of the things that I before we even get into that a little bit, though, I want to talk a little bit about some reactions that I've seen when, especially when a partner has spoken their truth, when a partner has really just revealed that a relationship has major problems and that they might want to be done. I will typically see several different kinds of reactions. There might be a big angry reaction where the person hearing all of this truth shoots back all the problems that the other partner has caused. So they hear all the anger, they hear all the problems, they hear the truth, and they shoot back with their own complaints and their own concerns. Almost as a way of saying, my problems are bad, but yours are worse. I don't know if anyone's, seen this themselves. You try to speak up for yourself, and your partner just complains right back. Or maybe the other way around. The problem with this is it comes across as complaining or scorekeeping, and neither partner is likely to feel heard or understood. There's other problems that come up with speaking your truth. It may be that a situation where one partner or the other wakes up. They decide, okay, what they've been doing was incorrect, and they decide to make some big changes, which arguably is good. In the process, though, I often will see them try to push down the motivations for their unhealthy behavior. Some examples of this. It might be, maybe the problem behavior, maybe the big problem that just got brought up was alcoholism. Most people generally agree that, alcoholism is a bad problem. And so the alcoholic says, okay, I just need to stop drinking. I'll just push that down. Or if it's anger, I just need to stop being so angry. Or selfishness, I just need to stop being so selfish. And the problem with this sort of situation is they hear their partner's complaints, they see the dire nature of the situation, and this newly awakened partner ends up pushing down their own needs, the reason why these problems existed in the first place. They don't address the underlying concerns, and this ends up being unsustainable. So this is where we get the alcoholic who just promises again and again and again, I'm going to stop drinking, or I'm just going to let go of that anger, or I'm going to let go of that selfishness. And this doesn't really get anywhere, because in the process of someone speaking their truth, the other person reacts and tries to address it, but it's not balanced. A third reaction I will see that becomes problematic here is they get overwhelmed. The person hearing this truth gets overwhelmed, and they feel like the pattern of problems feels too entrenched. And there's a sense that there isn't any ability to change what's going on. And we could use the same sort of example problems like alcoholism. They say, okay, I'm just too stuck in my drinking problems that nothing's going to really work. Or I just can't seem to let go of these angry situations that I might be holding on to. I can't seem to control myself to not react. In all of these cases, whether you react with anger yourself in hearing this truth, or whether you wake up and you go into this scurrying around making these changes and pushing down your own needs, or whether you get overwhelmed and sad and depressed and you stop doing anything, none of these really resulted in much good, obviously. And all of these were coming about usually from someone speaking their truth and being true to themselves and trying to bring up what was really concerning them. Even the partner that gives this sudden announcement of I'm done, it doesn't tend to do it. They don't tend to, this is part of the problem. The person speaking their truth can be part of the problem as well. And I'm not saying here that people need to push down what they need and not speak up and not be true to themselves. That's not at all what I'm saying. But almost universally, what I've seen is that when the truth comes out, it's usually a statement of all the complaints, all the faults, all the problems that are going on, and that's about it. Now, this isn't all situations, this isn't all relationships, but this is many situations where, as people open up and speak up about what's wrong, where that doesn't go right. Many people would describe these complaints or voicing of faults, the sudden announcements that the relationship is ending, the scorekeeping, all this other thing. They would call this speaking their truth. They are being true to themselves, and they're speaking up, and they're finally letting other people around them know about it. They've turned this corner, and they're going to do something about it. And here's the thing. Like just a moment ago, just a little bit ago, even I was talking about speaking your truth as being true to who you are, which is accurate. And in a sense, voicing your complaints and pointing out the ways that you've been hurt is a form of being true to yourself or speaking your truth. Now, at the same time, though, and this is where we get into much more productive area. At the same time, many of the examples that I've discussed so far are not productive ways of doing this. So if you are really looking for that solution of being able to speak up for yourself, or to be able to receive your partner speaking up for themselves, it requires some balance. It requires a few things here. These are almost always the suggestions that I give to my own clients when I'm telling them to speak up for themselves, to try to be more true to themselves, or to, as they receive that information from their partner. I always, number one, I tell them to steer the conversation or try to give emphasis to the things that are wanted rather than focusing on all the many things that are wrong. So if your husband, wife, partner has come to you and says, you were never there for me, and you're so very selfish, and you're always angry, and this and this and this. This is an opportunity for you. It's an opportunity, one, for you to help your partner feel heard. And we're going to get into other pieces of this, getting it more balanced in a second. But this is an opportunity for you to support your partner in feeling heard when they are really trying to bring all this up and trying to build up the courage to speak up for themselves. And this goes both ways, this suggestion, whether it is you trying to speak up for yourself or your partner trying to speak up for themselves. If you can be the one that can steer the conversation towards what is wanted, what is preferred, the things that they're looking for, rather than all the many things that are wrong, it's going to go a lot better. Now, I'm going to point out, talking about what has been hurtful is okay. It's a useful tool for providing feedback. And I'm not saying shut that down. I'm saying hear that out and then steer the conversation towards what's wanted instead. My son, who's 8 years old, my wife and I have been trying to deal with this sort of issue ourselves. I don't know if any of you have children like this, but my son, he really likes to find all the ways that he's been wronged, and he will bring it up over and over again. And this is foreign to my wife and I. My wife and I are not the complaining types, and so we look at this, and at first, our first reaction was to shut that down. Okay, we would go to our son and say, okay, you need to stop complaining so much. Don't you see how much we're doing for you? And we ourselves went through the, one of those reactions that I said wasn't very helpful. We would sometimes react with some anger, like, don't you see this isn't helping? You just bringing up the complaint over and over again. And I'll tell you, we were wrong in reacting that way. We weren't used to someone close to us frequently bringing up those complaints. My wife and I started talking, and we started saying, okay, well, what's going on here? We're saying, okay, our son really wants to feel heard. He wants to feel like his complaints are being addressed. And that's not such a bad thing, we were saying to ourselves. And so we started implementing this suggestion right here of steering our son, who's only 8 years old, steering him towards what he is asking for and what he wants, rather than pointing out how his sister keeps doing this to him, or how we haven't been doing this other thing for them. How, the other days we had promised that we were going to take him to this amusement park. And he kept bringing it up over and over again. So we sat him down and we said, okay, what are you looking for? He says, I want to go to the amusement park. Okay, we were able to sit him down and validate his concern there, validate him speaking up for himself, and we were able to assure him of a plan, to fulfill our promise, so to speak. But it helped everyone through that process because he felt heard, and we were able to even ourselves address this issue of complaints being hard for us to hear, my wife and I. Number two, be flexible with how to meet goals. So if you can focus in on, okay, what are the goals of your truth rather than what the complaints are, it can be very, very helpful to lean towards some flexibility. And this, once again, goes both ways. I really like the work of this woman. Her name is Choate Madanes. And if any of you are really big into personal development, you might have heard her name. You might also recognize her name from the, I want to say it's the Robbins Madanes Institute or something. I don't know. It's Tony Robbins and Choate Madanes. They work together. And the way I understand it is, it seems like Choate Madanes has a lot of the ideas, and Tony Robbins is kind of the face of those things. But she talks about having basic emotional needs. And as I got into this, I was like, this is a really great concept. It's a really great way to discuss what is needed and have a more flexible conversation. And what I mean by it is this, like, going back from my example with my son, one of the basic needs that Choate Madanes talks about is this need for security. He wanted to feel secure or certain that he was going to be able to get what he wanted. He wanted some assurance that he was going to get this thing that he was really excited about. So rather than, we could have got into this situation saying, this is the solution right here, or he could have gotten into the solution being very adamant about, we need to go today, we need to go at this time. And throughout that would have, if we had made this discussion, let's say that my son instead was a peer, this would have created an argument. And many of the couples that I talk with, people get fixated on the specific solution that will meet their needs. You need to come home, and we need to end this separation. Or they might say, I'm not going to even consider that. I'm not going to talk to you at all because I need to respect myself. Or we can only communicate in text messages because I need to create some boundaries. And the thing is, in each of these cases, whether it's boundaries or wanting some assurance or connection that their partner is coming home, or whatever the need happens to be, there is a basic need that they're looking for. And it can demonstrate a high amount of respect for the other person if you can create some flexibility in the situation, whether it is flexibility on your own end, or if you are encouraging flexibility in your partner. So let's pretend that, your partner is inflexible, and they're saying, I need boundaries in my life. I cannot talk with you. I'm not going to speak with you at all. We can only communicate with text messages. Why I'm bringing up Choate Madanes is you can go into this situation with some flexibility. You can say, hey, I can see that you're looking for some respect. I can see that you're looking for whatever happens to be. And I'd really like to provide that for you. And I'm wondering if there's other ways that we can make this work, that we can make it so that you feel respected, but that we could also open up some communication. Like I said, going about a conversation like this, going about this really intense situation of maybe separation or a discussion of divorce or a division of assets, like these really high stakes situations, if you can create some flexibility while providing assurance that your partner's needs will be met while speaking up for your own, it really creates a high amount of respect in that situation. It demonstrates a high amount of consideration. And it creates an environment where the other partner will be much more willing to work with you on your own needs here. I mean, I use this, my wife and I, we've just gotten used to this over the years. I can remember not too long ago, I wanted to, speak up, speak my truth. And I wanted to tell my wife, hey, I need to be able to take some time just occasionally away from the family to spend time on my hobbies. And I said, I recognize, with 5 kids, this is going to be difficult at times. So how can we make it so that this is easier for you? This is how I approached this with her. And because I was flexible with this, because I was being considerate of how this might impact my wife, she was very happy to, work with me and accommodate a situation where we were both happy. But I approached it with flexibility, and I encouraged flexibility on her end. We're able to both speak our truth, be true to ourselves in that regard. The third suggestion is to be sure to foster balance in needs. One of the poor examples that I gave earlier was this example of someone, a partner speaking up. They said, okay, the marriage is in shambles. I don't love you anymore. I need to separate. And the reaction is this person wakes up and they say, I'm going to make all these changes and I'm going to go do this and this and this and this. And often in the process, they push down their own needs and the reasons behind maybe some of this poor behavior. Almost invariably, I get to a point when working with my clients when their spouse starts coming around, when they start saying, I can see all the changes in you, but I don't believe that the changes are permanent. When they start saying, I would like to get back together, I'm just very hesitant, I'm unsure, let's take things slow. Almost always it's because of this, is because there isn't enough balance. And people can pick up on that. It seems disingenuous. And so my suggestion always at that point is, okay, we need to, look at, are you speaking up for your needs as well? Are you listening to your partner? Or do they feel heard? Do they feel like you're accommodating for them? And then, are you speaking up for your own needs? Are you making sure that you're finding ways to work with your spouse so that you feel like your needs are met and the things that you want are sustainable? This is where it starts to become a lot more believable that things can work out, because they can see that you're not just making all these changes for them. They can see that you are trying to create a shift that you can keep up because you are taking care of yourself as well. And it's always, I think, needed at that stage in reconciliation. Throughout all this, whether this is discussing preferences or what's wanted instead of what complaints, being flexible, making sure that there's balance in needs. A lot of this is, what's at work here is essentially respect and consideration, whether that's self-respect or respect for your partner. And this is a lot of what opens up these conversations. It turns from someone speaking up, putting out all this anger and all this pain, and then shutting things off. It turns it from that into a situation where both partners can be open, they can be themselves in order to speak their truth. They don't have to put down who they are or to keep that hidden. There's not as much need to hide what you feel for in order to gain approval from the other person. So, I hope that was helpful. Always with these just individual podcasts when I don't have Heather on to bounce some ideas back and forth. These are going to be a little bit shorter, but I do want to get into the marriage myth buster today. And the marriage myth today, we always pull these from the Facebook group. So we'll always look into the group and see statements that are made by people in our audience, or people in some of the emails that we receive. And so these are things that people genuinely say, and I do see some of these myths circulating about. So today's myth is this idea of if you're truly in love, passion is not going to fade. And I find this myth interesting because just, scientifically speaking, it's just not accurate. It's been a little bit, but I remember looking at this chart. And, this is a chart tracking relationship happiness and satisfaction. Now, this may not be the same thing as passion, but it's going to relate, and I want to discuss this for a moment. But the tendency in many relationships is for there to be a high amount of satisfaction at the beginning. I mean, after all, this is the time when you tend to be focusing a lot more on each other. There tends to be less responsibilities because, at the beginning of a relationship, you're unlikely to have children together. You're unlikely to have a lot of ties to each other. There's less ability to hurt each other because you haven't been as open, you haven't opened yourself up as much. But the statistics show the average is that the average relationship after, 3-4 years, it starts to dip down. And it goes into this valley for some time. A little bit goes up and down a bit. And this tends to correlate with several things. It tends to correlate with increased responsibilities from children or advancing careers, especially if the marriages are younger. But just in general, as you tie your lives together, tends to be more responsibilities. And this is just, frankly, a natural process of most relationships. The satisfaction tends to pick up quite a bit, 15 to 20 years in. This is around the time when if there's been, 2, 3, 4 or more children, when the children are starting to get older, they're able to take care of themselves. They eventually move out. Careers have really become very steady, and you've gotten to a good stride in that situation. Financially, things tend to be better at that point in most people's lives. And so because a lot of extra stresses have been removed, there's a lot more ability to focus in on the relationship. And that's really what this is about. Why I'm bringing this up. Because in my opinion, it's not that if you're truly in love, passion will never fade. That can be true. It's more about how much are you actually allowing other stresses, other influences in your life get in the way of the relationship. Most people will, given the circumstances, put some extra focus on the children and put some extra focus on the career, which just leaves less time for the relationship in general. And most people in that situation, if this turns into a problem, have been in a situation where they say, my partner will be there. I can give them a little bit less attention, and that's fine. But that's really what happens, is other stresses get in the way. This is not about whether you're truly in love or what about passion fading. It's, have you protected your relationship from outside forces enough? One of the things that I love about my marriage with my wife Jen is that we've made this an emphasis. We have 5 kids. We're very busy. I own my own business that creates a lot of work. But we've always placed a priority on having time for each other and having a focus on the relationship. Even when, during the pandemic, when it's been hard to find babysitters, I'm sure many of you can relate, we created situations where we would say we're having a in-home date. And while, sure, it's not as magical, not as amazing, not as fun, it was still great to spend time with my wife and to, basically put some walls around our relationship and shut everything else out for just a little bit. And this is what ends up really maintaining that passion and that feeling of love long term. I'm happy to say, I am absolutely in love with my wife. I adore her. Just earlier today, I was eyeing her up and down. I'm not ashamed to say, and I let her know. I was like, I'm eyeing you up and down here, before I had to get into some meetings. And we kind of laugh about that, and it feels nice. And this is after 16 years of marriage, but I'm attributing it to the fact that we have kept those boundaries around our relationship, and we, even between us and the children, as an example, we do set, after a certain time at night, we're just, most nights we're just like, okay, we are not parents anymore unless the house is on fire. This is time for Jen and I. So the myth: if you're truly in love, passion will never fade, and that's not quite accurate. It's more like, if you keep boundaries and focus in on the relationship and find ways to appreciate the relationship, then passion won't fade. It's not about how in love you are, or the ability to be in love, or the ability to have passion, because those are all things that can be reintroduced back into a relationship. I hope that clears things up in terms of that myth right there. So, next week, we are going to go back to the announced topic. I believe it was the biggest mistake to avoid when reconnecting with your spouse. So we will go back to that. I believe Heather will be back. I think we're both going to be back on the podcast. It's been a little while, so I'm looking forward to that.
Thanks for listening to The Thriving Marriage, your A to Z blueprint for not just surviving marriage, but thriving. Until next time, my friends, thrive on.